Welcome to the Hot Girl School, the podcast where we redefine confidence and go way beyond the reflection you see in the mirror.
We're your hosts, Lauren and Danielle, here to empower you to embrace your inner radiance because confidence is so much more than looks.
Whether you're strutting into an event or conquering the boardroom, join us as we explore topics like self-love, inner strength, and owning your unique journey to confidence.
So grab your favorite drinkie and turn up that volume because you're about to unleash your true potential.
Hey hotties, welcome back to another episode of the Hot Girl School. Today, we are diving into a topic I know many of us have faced at some point, and that is imposter syndrome. That nagging feeling that we're not good enough, that maybe we don't deserve success, or somehow we just simply feel like a fraud or that we're faking it. And we are here to tell you that those feelings are lies. We're going to explore why we feel like this, more importantly, how we can break free from it. So, what's up, Lauren? Let's talk imposter syndrome.
Let's talk about it because I do believe that no matter who you are, how much success you've had, how much money you've made, how far you've come, it haunts everyone. It haunts everyone.
Truly, right? I know we've both talked about imposter syndrome. I just came off of a conference with like 80 women, all successful in their own right. And the amount of times that I heard imposter syndrome or I feel like an imposter, I feel like I'm not good enough was overwhelming to me. I'm like, okay, we got to do something to help with this. And I know I've personally experienced it too.
Oh, yeah. I think we feel it in so many phases of our lives. And the fun part is when you look back and you see how far you've come, that's where the confidence comes in. You're like, oh, I am qualified. I feel good to talk about this, to share this because I am valuable. It's
For
almost like
sure.
reinforcing yourself that you are good enough rather than seeking outside validation of, hey, what do you think? Which feedback helps, but this is really about yourself. So you want to break it
Yeah.
down and kind of give the
Yes.
listeners a better idea. You're like so well versed on this, so I'm excited to hear you say everything.
Yeah, so I thought what would be fun is we could break it down to like where does it come from? What types of imposter syndrome are there? How and then how do we address it? Like what are some really good takeaways for you today so that when you feel that feeling creep in where you're questioning if you're good enough or you're feeling like a fraud, you can draw on these takeaways to overcome it, still show up for yourself and crush it. So let's start by talking about some of the different faces of imposter syndrome. I've named them like the perfectionist, the soloist, the natural genius. Do any of those relate? Like, do you relate to any of those?
Definitely the perfectionist and the soloist. I actually refer to myself as a lone wolf. I don't want help with anything. And you and I have discussed we individually have a hard time asking for help.
Yeah.
I used to certainly not put anything out there because it had to be perfect. And then once that quote, it's better to be done than perfect got in my head and I really started
Yeah.
to implement that, I realized, oh my gosh, I could be sitting here for days, weeks, or months, like not getting done what I need to get done, all in the while all the while just trying to make sure that it's perfect. And no matter how many times I tweak it, I'm unhappy.
Yeah. So if any of you relate to that, this is like truly a character type of imposter
Mhm.
syndrome. And it's where you feel like asking for help feels like you're failing. And we're going to talk about, where does imposter syndrome stem from? And I think we, since we know each other in some of our traumas, we can identify it. But one that I know a lot of people suffer from, and I definitely do, I call myself a recovering perfectionist.
Mhm.
And when you are a perfectionist, you feel like you need to get everything 100% right 100% of the time. And that is just setting yourself up for failure. Like that's impossible. No one is perfect. And I love the quote that you shared. That one's made a huge impact on me too. And giving yourself that grace is how you start to kind of overcome like, okay, done is better than perfect, right? Like you said. So let's get into a little bit of like where imposter syndrome comes from. Where do you think it comes from?
I think it comes from not feeling good enough. It's really just about worth, is my understanding. However, when I looked up the actual definition, I told you it felt very backwards to me. I
Yeah.
thought that it was going to be I have to act like I know everything. Am I describing this right? I have to
Yeah.
act like I know everything, so if I show up in a room with, a ton of investors talking about very particular, like, net sheets, for example, and I don't know anything about it, I have to sit there and pretend like I do, but it's the exact opposite of that.
Yeah.
So, I'll let you take it from
Yeah,
there.
like pretending you're like that's truly being an imposter, right? Because then you like you're being an imposter when you don't know what you're talking about and you're afraid to say like I don't actually know anything about that. Let me get back to you. Right? So yeah, totally the opposite. And from the research that I've done, imposter syndrome comes from so many places and it's something that everyone experiences at some point in their life. It can be from childhood experiences. Comparison is a huge one, which is highly problematic with social media. So like the more you're scrolling or you're meeting new people and like everybody's putting their best foot forward online, especially if they're running a digital business. So that comparison can really cause problems, and then societal expectations of you are where expectation comes in. Like, I'll give you an example. So, I am a proud college dropout. And early on in my entrepreneurial journey, I started speaking to doctors. And so I absolutely felt like an imposter at that point because the societal expectations are that I should be a college educated person if I'm then educating doctors. Right. So that is a little bit about like where it comes from. And let's talk about next, like what where the fear creeps in. Like, do you have any examples where you felt like an imposter and like walk us through how that felt like in your body, in your mind, etc.?
I think that I actually have, like, an umbrella imposter syndrome in the sense
Sure.
of all in my 20s, I just partied away because I was always valued for my looks. I was paid to be places between Scottsdale, Arizona, Las Vegas, and Atlantic City for
Mhm.
years. So my worth was based on my looks. So I made sure I was at the gym every day. I was very anorexic at the time. Like, I just went out and had fun because my worth, excuse me, was based on what I looked like and how I showed up to these gigs, if you want to call them.
Sure.
And so when I realized at 31 that, okay, I'm not married, I don't have kids, the career hasn't really taken off. Of course, I was working this whole time in addition to being, it's called Scottsdale 16 Girl. Called, but it didn't, it felt like couldn't get my feet on the ground, and I was like, "Okay, so I guess I'm just gonna do real estate and take it more seriously," even though I had been in it for 10 years, but I wasn't taking
Mhm.
it seriously because I didn't think anything of myself, of having a brain, of being able to negotiate, of learning, and of course, I had done deals, but each deal just kind of felt like I skid by, like, "Oh,
Sure.
okay, I got another one done, okay." And so once I became confident in real estate and I actually know what to do, which took a long time to undo the other of only being worthy of my looks, then I was able to look back and say, okay, I actually do know a lot and I am confident in how I present myself and I don't need anyone else. But it took a really long time to get there because it took a really long time to build it up.
Sure. Do you remember a specific time, like maybe there was a transaction or a meeting where you felt like nervous and wanted to like make up a sickness so you didn't have to show up because you felt like an imposter?
um, what I would do is when I used to go to listing appointments, I would bring someone else. And
So like your
I no
crutch.
one yeah, no one
Okay.
really taught me how to prepare for them. I didn't know how to prepare for them, and every single time, I kid you not, every single time for years and years and years, no matter who I brought, every single seller said, "You know, Lauren, I would work with you, but I don't like your partner." And
Mm.
I just every time I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I got this." But then of course I went on one by myself and I didn't get it. So I was like, "Okay, I'm not sure which way this goes."
Sure.
But it was a reflection of I'm there, I just need to hone my skills. And it's hard and it's scary.
Yeah. Okay. So basically let's break down because there's something crazy that happens with imposter syndrome that I find fascinating and it has to do with our brain. So,
Okay.
our brain is wired to protect us, right? And it's wired to respond to fear to keep us safe. So imposter syndrome actually triggers the same feeling of fear, like real fear. If you were being kidnapped or chased by a robber, right? It's the same feeling, the fear that you have to like go do the presentation, to show up and close the deal and show the house all by yourself, right? So the fear where this happens from is our amygdala. And it creates this feeling of like fight or flight. And so that's why our body gets tense. That's why we start to want to make up, crazy, weird illnesses so that we can get out of plans. And what we need to do to stop that is to face the fear, name the fear, and then reframe the fear. So we can start to get into, I think that it would help if we gave a couple more examples of times that, because I know you and I have definitely felt like imposters more than once. So let's
Mhm.
share a couple more times where we felt that might help listeners relate to. And then we'll get into exactly how you can tackle imposter syndrome to move away from it and to deal with it the next time you feel it, because we're all going to experience it again.
Absolutely. So the fight or flight is interesting because it sounds like most people in imposter syndrome tend to just run. There's no fighting involved. It's just the flight. Is that what you're saying?
No, so I mean, it triggers the fight or flight feeling and even the freeze feeling. Like it can feel
Okay.
completely debilitating. So everybody experiences it differently, but what happens is because the fear. So what the thoughts that you're having, feeling like you can't do it or that you're not successful enough or that your success isn't real and you're feeling like a fraud, that is triggering the same thing as actual fear in your brain, like things that you should be afraid of. And so then your response is fight, flight, or freeze. And in order to overcome it, like some people just power through and show up, but there's actual techniques that you can do to overcome it and to help your brain with that so it settles and it helps you deal with the imposter syndrome and kind of push it aside because you are successful, you are meant to be there, and we all matter, right?
So it's facing it head on, which to me starts with self-awareness. Okay, let's have you give some examples because I know you have stuff to share. So let's hear your side. When have you felt it?
Yeah, I mean, so many times. Some like early on, I can remember really early on feeling like an imposter. This sounds so silly, but at an elementary school talent show. So I used to choreograph. I grew up dancing. I absolutely loved it. I taught dance through high school, and in elementary school, I would choreograph group dances. And this one year, I decided to choreograph a dance for my friends, but also do a solo dance. And I felt like an imposter. I was like, why do I think that like I could do this without a group? Kind of similar to you using like it was the group was my crutch, right?
Right.
I didn't want to really showcase my abilities or my skills as a dancer. And I was in 5th grade. And I powered through it and I didn't have any techniques to manage it, but that's like the first time that I can really think back being like, okay, that was imposter syndrome. Right? I
So
had been
how do you
dancing since
sorry
I
to
was
interrupt,
2. Yeah.
but how do you know that that's not, like, just nerves? Do you know what I'm
Well,
saying? Like,
yeah. Yeah, so the difference between like nerves and imposter syndrome is nerves are like that shaky voice, a rapid heart rate. You might start sweating, but you're not questioning whether or not you're capable.
okay.
Okay, so when you know it's imposter syndrome is when you're questioning your capabilities and you're feeling like a fraud or feeling like someone's gonna be like, she doesn't actually know what she's doing. She's a fraud.
So just all the doubt is creeping in
Yep.
hard. Okay.
Yep.
That's a great
So I can
example, and
remember
that's such
that.
a young age that you are experiencing it. Obviously, you don't know how to put that into words and share it with anybody, much less is anybody going to ask you, "Honey, are you feeling imposter syndrome
Right?
right now?"
Yeah, it was definitely nerves coupled with imposter syndrome. Like I had the skills to dance. I had choreographed dances for my friends. And so
Mhm.
why was I questioning my abilities? So it's interesting just to kind of reflect and go, "Oh, that was a big one." One that I'm feeling like right now, I'm writing a book and I'm like, "Who the hell am I?" Like no one's going to want to read this. And my story is fascinating. So yes, they will. And now I'm able to overcome it so much faster when that creeps in as I'm writing because of the techniques that we're going to talk about.
I mean, having the tools is definitely gonna change the pace of how long you sit in the frozen mode or the flight mode, right? So, as you're writing your book, How often is this coming up for you, and what do you let's ask this. Do you have a theme of when it keeps popping up, or is it just in general, like just writing the book?
I don't think that it hasn't been something that's like debilitating or polarizing for me. It's more like I need to pay attention to it. As we were preparing for today's episode, I was like, what are sometimes like right now that I'm feeling that, right? Because it happens to everybody. And so I need to pay a little bit more attention to see like if there is a theme, and that's actually a technique that you can do to try and prevent it if you notice the theme when you're working on reframing. And it's more like if I'm feeling like stumped on my creative process, or like, oh, should I leave this part out? It's like second guessing myself and whether or not that portion of the story will be valuable. And then mostly what I'm doing is like sit with it, walk away, come back and keep writing, right? And knowing that like those feelings are normal is one of the best ways to start. Like an easy step is to just know that everyone feels that way, and having that normalized for you in your brain is super helpful.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, I think everybody has present day, past, and will certainly have it in the future. Obviously, I don't think this is something that goes away because imposter syndrome seems to be very wrapped up in change, growth, expansion. And in order to get to the next level, you have to break free from the comfort zone. But as you said, the brain's trying to keep you in the comfort zone, which is what's creating the fact that you can't even get to the next level because you don't think you're safe. And it's not like you're sitting here saying, "Oh, I'm not safe doing this." It's a very caveman like
Yeah,
way that the body and the
primal
brain
instincts.
operate. Yeah, so it's become I can see how you have to sit down and like really talk yourself through it, and probably when you need to, you call somebody who's supportive and can see that and
Yeah.
get you through it with you and talk it out with you.
Yep. So let's talk about, because what you're talking about is one of the techniques. So what you just described is reframing. So it's simply having a conversation with yourself, acknowledging that, like, hey, I know you're here. Hey, brain, I know you're here to protect me, but this is actually an opportunity for me to grow. I'm not in actual, I'm not in actual danger. Right. So acknowledging to yourself, like, hey, am I actually in danger? That's a question you could ask. No, I'm not. Okay, brain, thank you for being there for me and doing your job and trying to protect me. But this is an opportunity for me to move forward and grow in my journey. So
I
the
love that.
reframe, right? So you want to start with the reframe. And then another really great technique is to then practice gratitude, to like thank you. Like I kind of said that, right? Like thank your brain for being there to protect you. And then to combat like the negative bias, it also helps to focus on your wins. So I don't know if you do this, but I definitely do. I have like I call it my rap sheet. Fun fact, my party trick is rapping, not like on my own, but like to music that is already made. And so I call it my rap sheet, and I will go through when I'm doubting my abilities or if I'm qualified for something, and I'll go through and read some of my wins. And it is a reminder to myself that, like, hey, you got this. Do you do anything like that?
I like that. That's a really, really good tool to start implementing. And I bet even sitting down and making it, because I don't know how long you've been making it, but if you are making the initial list, that's probably going to be super fun, give you a little ego boost. You're going to do your little dance,
Yep.
and then you can start adding to it. I like that idea. I do not have anything like that. I do not. So I might have to
Well, now
implement.
you're gonna make your
Yeah.
rap sheet. You're gonna
Yeah.
make your
Mine
rap
is
sheet.
definitely going to be a handwritten because I'm not a computer person. I sit at the computer all day. Is yours like in an Excel spreadsheet?
It's no, it's just in my notes. It's in my notes on my
Okay.
phone, and I try and add to it, and it's like an anchor for me. Like when I'm like, "You're not qualified," or "You're not good enough." We all have those thoughts. I can go, "Wait, yes. Hell yeah, I am. Look at all this stuff that I've done."
Dude. And the visual of it's very impactful and powerful on top of it. So to go back and
Mhm.
think of it as you put the list together, to write it down in the present when you're experiencing it or it just happened, and then to see it all written down on paper is very, very powerful. That should just make you smile in and of itself.
Yes. Now, this next one, I know you do this because we've talked about it. We both are really good at, you could call it visualize, like the term for it is visualization. We might
Mhm.
refer to it as manifesting. So, another really great technique that you can do when you're feeling like an imposter is start to ask yourself questions like, well, what does it look like once I do that? What does that mean for me? What do I get from it? What things do I get to learn? And you start to visualize the person that you will be after doing the hard thing that you're feeling like an imposter about. And it helps quiet the noise of the fear in your brain, but it also helps you start to embody that person you're wanting to become. So do you have any strategies around like we typically call it manifestation, but manifestation is also visualization.
Correct. Yeah, I would say that I learned somewhere along the way that if you cannot visualize the outcome, then that's probably not for you. And when I started realizing that, because my big dream for a long time was to be like the household real estate name like Taylor Swift is for music. I wanted to be that for real estate, but the truth is I don't actually want to be that. I don't need to be famous. I want to make money and have a quality life, but that does not include fame. I'm not trying to like go be a Taylor Swift. But for a long time because I just loved her so much, past tense.
I'm fine, everything's
um,
fine.
I really wanted to just like what I loved about her was that she could switch from genre to genre. And so I
Mhm.
saw her like I saw myself in that. Like, okay, so maybe I add on lending, maybe I add on life insurance, maybe I add on
Yeah,
interior design, maybe take over multiple cities. Like I could see myself doing that, but I kind of felt like it was made up to be parallel with her, if that makes sense,
sure.
rather than what I really wanted. Because when you do daydream, which can also be a visualization, that wasn't a part of it. So it's a good
Mm.
question to ask yourself, is this what I want because I emulate this with someone else, I admire this, or is this something that you truly want? And does that sit with you? Is that a resonating? Is that what you want your life to be like? And it's okay if it's not like anybody else's. I think that's important to say because like you said, highlighting social media, we all kind of
Mhm.
fall into sync with other people. Fall in sync, fall into sync. We all fall
Yeah,
in
or we I
line.
mean, we're like, "Wow, they have this or they have that," or maybe they're further like, it's a comparison thing. So you might be like for me, this year I started an online digital coaching company, and, that I'm in chapter 1 of doing that. So an example that people could relate to, I think, would be like if I'm scrolling coaches that have been doing it for 10 years, I'm comparing my chapter 1 to their chapter 10, and that doesn't help me because they have 10 more years of knowledge than I do in the space. That doesn't mean that my methods that I'm sharing and that I'm helping business owners with don't carry the same weight or have the same value or aren't going to help people. But when you're scrolling on social media and you're like, shit, they just had a 7-figure launch. Okay, you're not even 1 year in. Calm down.
Correct. And that is the hardest part because it's the same with real estate. When I was new, I would look at the, seniors in the office and I'm thinking to myself, I don't understand how are you selling $15 million houses? And I'm like in my 20s, like I don't know
Yeah.
anybody who can sell 15 or who can buy or sell $15 million houses. And so, yeah, I think that's actually the most golden piece of information that anybody can get. Do not compare your beginning years, chapter 1, to
Yeah.
somebody else's year 10, year 20, year 30 because you will forever be unhappy. You will forever be unhappy.
Well, and I think a lot of imposter syndrome, like just from what I learned from talking to women at an event that I was just at, a lot of it does come from the scrolling. So you gotta stop yourself in your tracks and go like, is this helping me? Is scrolling this and looking through it like because maybe you're doing some research and you want to kind of learn from what somebody else is doing, and that's all fine and great, but it's not if it's affecting your mental health and how you're viewing yourself and how you're questioning your own abilities. So you got to have a like let's pause. What is this meant to teach me? What am I feeling right now? Am I feeling like I'm not good enough? Okay, that's imposter syndrome. Let's name it. Let's get off social media and let's get to work on the things that we're trying to do. Let's take some action to make ourselves feel better.
Correct. You can certainly find plenty of inspiration on social media. Usually, what I do is I give myself a task, I get on, and I just do that one task and I get off. And if you're going
Yeah.
to scroll, I know that you can put alarms now on your phone so that it goes off in 5 minutes. And maybe there's mindless scrolling, maybe there's research scrolling. Like you need to
Yep.
be a little bit more intentional of how you do that because it's so easy to get lost and you're just perpetuating your imposter syndrome.
You're in an echo chamber. We can call it like, what lane of scroll am I in? right? That's a good question for you to stop. Like, whoa, I'm feeling funny. What lane of scroll am I in? Am I mindlessly scrolling and making myself feel bad? Am I getting knowledge and inspiration? What's happening here? And just
Correct.
starting to get into like that practice will help. So I love it. I know that imposter syndrome is a huge topic and we could probably talk for hours on it, but we love to give you guys tangibles. So, let's wrap up today's episode with recapping the 3 things that you can do to help combat imposter syndrome. So, step 1 is name it and reframe it, right? So, name what's happening to you, reframe it, let your brain know that you are doing okay. The second one is gratitude rep sheet, right? So celebrate your small wins. Make sure you have those somewhere to anchor into to remind yourself of your capabilities. And our third takeaway for you, and we didn't talk about this one too much, but it is so helpful. It's phone a friend, get feedback, ask for a pep talk. Everybody should have someone in their life that they can call and be like, I'm having a really down day. Help me out.
Oh, yeah. That is but it has to be somebody on the same level, which we've talked about this in multiple episodes previously. Finding that person who supports you, who gets it, who's on the same wavelength, and who understands the reason for your call. I think that's a
Yeah.
huge part of it. Like you and I could obviously call and have a conversation, but to just call somebody who's, a drinking friend, for example, they're not going to be able to contribute much. So be very mindful of who you choose when you phone a friend.
Yeah, so maybe we can add to the list and put it before the third one. Find out who your pep talk buddy is. Like who understands what you're going through in business or can help you. And if you don't have one, like go make a friend. Go find one. They're out there. So the next time your brain tries to tell you that you are not good enough, remember these tips and walk through them because you matter and the world needs your value.
Thank you, hotties, for listening. We cannot wait to hear how you are going to implement this. This is a big one. We want to hear how it's working for you. So give us a shout out. We want to hear. And school is out of session.
Ta ta, ladies.